Bryan,
Zuckerberg.
fucking Zuckerberg, bro.
Bro, when I was there, I think it was like a few years ago, he had just bought that property and then he closed it off. There was that big battle
Yeah,
where he had
so
closed off that.
the history of that place, for me, that's the first time I went diving when I was about 9, 10 years old. That's where my dad took me. It was at night. And then my dad and I used to go camp there a lot, fishing and diving and whatnot. As time went on, I grew older. Me and my friends started diving there, did really well. And back then, Jimmy Fluger of Fluger Dealerships, Fluger Acura, he owned all that place. And then he had a caretaker, Gordon Rosa, from Anahola, that he was friends with my friend, and he always gave us access to that place down to the beach. And I took my family camping there, fishing, diving, and got a lot of history over there. It's a beautiful place, and after the Coloco Dam incident, and Jimmy Fluger lost the property, and after his passing, Gordon Rosa was no longer the caretaker there, and then it got sold to Mark Zuckerberg. We lost all our access there, access to the beach and diving there, and it was kind of a bummer. We have so much I have so much history over there, and when I was a kid, there was roads. Nobody owned it when I was a kid. There was roads that go to different sections down there. You could drive right down to the beach, and it was so killer. So my dad and I would have all these different spots where we go diving at night and whatnot, or fishing or camping, all across that area. But now it's a bummer. Like a lot of the rich bought out a lot of property over there. Even the one more east of that, Molowa, there was nothing there but cane fields way back in the day. And, it's pretty sad to see that Zuckerberg wants to, or it's rumored that Zuckerberg wants to blow it up and to bring his yacht in there. He also tried to turn like 5 miles of that coastline extending out from the shoreline 5 miles out. He tried to turn that place into a whale sanctuary so no boats could pass through because he didn't want any boats in his view. And there was a huge explosion about that, the local people, and everybody was just like, "Screw you, we're doing it anyway." And then it didn't pass with the Well Foundation and stuff like that. Even they said that we can't really do that. So, but Zuckerberg is just coming here and just trying to do whatever he wants. He's like the rest of the rich people here.
Dude, it's fucking incredible to me because it's like you don't understand how real life. You're like going to an island where you're isolating, the pissing off. It's like the fucking purest form of why aren't all the fucking liberals freaking out about this? It's like the purest form of like the white fucking man coming and taking over all your
Yeah.
shit. Essentially, it's the same shit, only now we're 200 years later or 400 years later or whatever it is, and nobody says a motherfucking thing except the locals. It's like, dude, you know how this ends, dude? You piss us off to the point where we burn your fucking house to the ground.
I think it's
Like,
definitely coming to that. Honestly, I think that's the only way the people's voices are going to be heard, and there's going to have to be some sacrifices made for sure. There's going to have to
yeah,
be people going to jail. I'll probably be one of them. So
shocking.
yeah. So I mean,
Hey, you just got to have a rich white friend to get an attorney to bail your ass
not on
out.
Kauai. Yeah, not on Kauai.
Oh, that's true.
But it's for like
Yeah.
people like Zuckerberg. I can see where they're coming from because they never had any culture in their lives. They came from a city. They grew up
Right.
in a city. They don't have a sense of culture, a sense of belonging, really, like how we do. We have a sense of belonging to our island, our land, our home, our ocean. We have a deep connection with this. Not just we just don't fish for fun or stuff like that. Like people like Zuckerberg, they just come and take. They don't have understand of culture of what it means to the native people here, and so he tries to like give back by doing these donations. But I'm just like, one right doesn't make up for a handful of wrongs. Just it.
That's easy though,
Yeah.
right? He has so much
Just
money. Does that really mean anything? You just
yeah.
fucking here.
So, Brett, what
Yeah.
Al just started there,
Yes.
I think that's a good intro to speaking about spearfishing in Hawaii as opposed to the
yeah.
mainland U.S. in the sense that in Hawaii, spearfishing is extremely cultural. People are raised from when they're very small children. They're taught sustainable gathering practices. They're taught which species, the ideal time to take those, how you're going to feed your family in a sustainable way without overtaking. So if we're to get restrictions in the way of, okay, well, you guys can't go there anymore, and where he was talking about that area is called Pila, where Zuckerberg is. So if you're saying when we were children we could access that, but now the white colonizers come in and making it so we can't access that, that's an issue, right? But also, if you look across the ocean to how popular spearfishing is becoming in a mainland area where it's kind of glamorized by social media, and all I got to do to get my foot in the door is take a spearfishing class, go down to the dive shop, buy some gear, and get myself on a boat charter. And next thing you know, I'm spearing tuna. That's a huge leapfrog of a progression. Like, you really missed out. Ideally, you go with a mentor that's very experienced that shows you right from wrong, and has you learn with a pole spear, which has a very limited range, and that enforces your hunting tactic. That forces you to become an observer versus an instant taker. So I think that cultural deviation is what really makes someone that grew up in Hawaii spearfishing as opposed to someone that just kind of took it on as a hobby and may or may not stick with it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so well, you brought up a point about the pole spear, and I think by default, growing up when we were kids, pole spearing, like I didn't have an extra $800 or $1,000 laying around to buy a spear gun, right? So you had this shitty little pole spear at the time, which you don't really know any better because you're a kid. And like you said, I mean, you went out all the time, and my dad scuba dove, but he didn't spearfish. And you go out all the time with this pole spear and you're shooting these little perch. But I remember, like, I saw it in my son when I took him out with his pole spear, and the first fish he landed was like a little perch, and he was beside himself. Like, you know what I mean? And then it was like, okay, cool. That meant more than for me, bluefin tuna, in a lot of ways for him. But I feel like exactly what you said. It's different when you grow up in it and you've kind of gone through these slow progression by either virtue of, finances or just by virtue of where you live. Um, it shapes who you are and the way you look at things. I think in spearfishing, though, everybody goes through this natural progression where, and I think we talked about on the last podcast we did with you guys, where it's like some people that just start out, they start shooting everything. And then eventually you get like super, super selective, like the maturity that happens when you spearfish. Mm-hmm. And if we could like kind of start off a little better rather than like shoot everything, well, no, you don't want, like you guys were talking about. And I learned it by, I guess, like by scuba diving, like, hey, you don't want to shoot this fish because this is what this does on the reef. It's kind of cool. Like, and you kind of already connected to the animals just by spending so much time in the water, not hunting them. So when you see them, it's kind of like, well, this guy's not really hard to hunt, he swims right up to you. But it's different when I think guys are starting out now, like exactly what you said. I mean, you saw it when you guys came here. You jump on a charter, you get in and fish, and you blast, 100-pound tuna. And it's like, that's pretty impressive. But it kind of warps your sense of maturity, I think. I don't know.
Well,
Your
I
sense of
think,
growth.
Brett, you kind of, when you do it that way, you kind of miss the natural order of things, in the sense that it's one thing to just shoot a fish, take a picture with it, look at me, look at what I did, as opposed to becoming a hunter, adopting that mentality of, I'm going out and I'm procuring my own food source with my own hands and my own ability. And you really need to start from the bottom, learn the species, because as you improve as a diver, the difficulty of attaining that next desirable species becomes within reach. So an example of that is you might start in 10, 15 feet of water with a pole spear, picking through the rocks, shooting little half-pound fish. And then eventually, as you can dive deeper and you get better equipment, you graduate to a gun, now you've got some range. Now you can shoot a different kind of fish. And it should be like 5 or 10 years down the road that you go, okay, I feel like I have mastery over the reef. Let's check out that blue water action and some pelagics, because now we've got floats and bungees and breakaways and big, powerful guns. But I feel like there should be like a rite of passage to that. Because now, like you said, Al and I never shot a bluefin tuna in our lives. And we've been diving our whole lives. And the reason we were able to be successful is because we took all of our experience of adapting. And every time we got dumped in the water, we tried something different until we figured out what worked and what didn't. And that's through the power of adaptation, which you only gain through experience. What are your thoughts, Al?
Yeah, well, as far as like spearfishing goes, I feel like it's kind of sad to me. Social media definitely exploited spearfishing. Spearfishing in Hawaii to me has kind of lost its soul, lost its mana. I mean, people are just spearfishing because it's cool, posting pictures, trying to hopefully they get sponsored, free gear. To me, they're doing it for a lot of people are doing it for the wrong reasons, but there are a lot of those who are still doing it for the cultural purposes, like just bringing home food for their families and whatnot. And that's the side of spearfishing we don't see, because those are the people who are not posting pictures and stuff like that, And I still know quite a few people like that, and they're just hardcore. It's like, hey, if I don't go diving, we don't get to eat tonight. I gotta go diving. And it's another thing why it's losing its soul is like now there's so much information out there, which is great, keeps a lot of divers safe, but like the simple things about learning how to rig your own stuff and whatnot, I think that's all part of spearfishing having its soul. Is like when I grew up, I had to figure out how to tie a band. I was trying to use all these different knots, and my wishbone kept popping out, and I didn't know what to do. It took me so much trial and error, but when I figured it out, I was like proud, just like stoked. Nowadays, you can just go on YouTube and be like, hey, okay, that's how you do it. Oh, okay, let's go. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like there's not much effort being put into learning a cultural thing in Hawaii like spearfishing and fishing anymore. It's just more for glam and all that. I don't know. It seems real different to me now. It seems like there's not much value in it anymore. I don't know. Social media's kind of ruined it for me. But I mean, what I do like about social media is meeting like great people like you, Matt, Jacob, all these people from the mainland who are great divers, great humble people who dive for one reason, just to bring home food for their families and their friends, and that's awesome, So I don't know. It's in like different places of the world, right? Spearfishing is more of like a hobby, like you said, it's like they see it on social media, it's like, oh yeah, cool, let's try that, and then people get into it and do great and whatnot, and that's good for them. It just I'm hoping and praying that these people kind of like don't sell it out either, sell out spearfishing. It's kind of like the one thing I have left really in my life, spearfishing and fishing, that actually has some value besides my daughter, so I don't know. I always have mixed feelings about everything, mixed emotions. So
That's not a bad thing. That just means you're able to think about everything from different perspectives. But it seems like, and the situation that you described, which I agree with, is that you have this explosion of spearfishermen, and they got inspired by somebody to get involved, right? So they got inspired by somebody, but hopefully that's why I feel like it's so important for people that have similar views like we do, to be just as active on social media to counteract some of that. When they're young, I say young, I mean, I'm 43, but like when the guys are like 20 and it's like, hey, that person's being paid to go spearfish. Oh, I'd like to do that. Let me do this and post all these big pictures and all this stuff like that, which I understand a part of that. But the other is it's so important for us to be involved to be like, hey, I totally get that, but here's the other side of it. Like, you don't have to be like that to be a sponsor. You don't have to be like that. This is not really what this is about.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of
Yeah.
the things that really showed people how dangerous spearfishing can actually be is, when we had the pandemic, people weren't working. They were looking for stuff to do. They took up spearfishing as a new hobby, and they looked for guidance on social media, YouTube, what have you. And the common thread was take a freediving course at the very minimum. Get some gear, find a buddy. So those things were good. But what people didn't see that was important is learning about conditions, learning about what a true buddy means. A buddy is not just we're diving in the same zip code of water. If he drops, everything stops. I'm now focused on spotting him. And it works both ways. And we're not having one person on the bottom. Oh, I saw a fish. I'm on the bottom at the same time. I mean, and that's why when that first came out, there was a person dying. One person per month for like 5 months straight were dying. They either had shallow water blackouts or they were just getting lost. Oh, I don't know. I was with them. We separated. I couldn't find them. And that's kind of the result. That's kind of the point that at least I'm trying to make is if you're going to do it, respect it for what it is. And ideally find yourself a mentor that is experienced, that is willing to spend the time with you and learn the right way. Like I was recently approached about doing some sort of spearfishing instructional videos. And I told the person that approached me about it, I said, I disagree with that concept because you can watch all the videos in the world, but unless you're actually in the shit, right? You're getting sucked out of the channel in a strong current. You're getting pulled under by the fish when you're trying to kick up. You have to make you're getting tangled up in your line. Unless you're in the shit, you don't get to learn that life lesson that flips that switch and goes, oh, damn, they weren't kidding. I really need to pay attention to this aspect, right? So if you can find that mentor and you can come up that way, then you're going to be the ideal next generation, in my opinion.
And another thing too about going back to about selling out spearfishing. There are people out here who are like influencers and who aren't even really spearos. Like they've been starting to dive for like a year, and because they have like 10 million YouTube followers and they make money off that shit, they're trying to use spearfishing for their own income. And to me, that's selling out our way of life, and I don't agree with that. First off, if you haven't been spearfishing for a lifetime, you have no right to sell out our spearfishing culture. Not only that, it's going to probably be unsafe for others that follow them. See what they're doing. Think, oh, I can do that. He's only been diving for a year. Oh, I can do that too. I can shoot those kind of fish. And to take our culture and to sell it out for a profit, that to me is just wrong. That's just wrong. Like there's people here on Kauai who do that shit, and I don't agree with it. And like that one time you told me that woman, that Olympian woman, she doesn't even spearfish, and she was asking Bryan to take her spearfishing just so that she could post something cool on our Instagram page, so she can make money off of it. Like that's what I mean. People trying to sell out our culture, our way of life. We lost
So
you there.
that's
Oh,
So in that
no, you
example,
got me.
what's interesting is when someone is new to it, of course they want to find somebody that is experienced. Of course they want to find someone that will mentor them. But the unrealized portion of that is it's a two-way street, right? If I'm going to go diving with someone, what kind of training have they had? What kind of experience do they have? That's great if he's inexperienced and I've got his back 100%. But what happens if I get in trouble, right? So that's the selling point it's a two-way street, right? A buddy system doesn't work if both people don't participate in it.
Right. So is your main, I mean, honestly, is your main point that it's not so much the newbies, guys that new want to get into the sport. It's the reason why.
Yes.
Is it just because, oh, it's popular right now, so let me do this,
Yes, there's
right?
got to be some kind of value to it. There's got to be some real purpose to it. There's got to be some kind of like I said, we do it for food. Like I grew up with my dad. We went diving and fishing every weekend, and the main purpose of that was just to eat. Because we grew up poor here. I grew up poor. And so I grew up with that value of like everything I do in my life has to have a purpose, a genuine purpose, not for a show or anything like that.
So it's interesting though. One of my biggest pet peeves right now is kind of what you're talking about, is that you see it to me gleaming among females divers, and nothing against females, this isn't it, but you see it where it's like, okay, I got my OnlyFans isn't working out, so let me jump over here, and now I can be like the poster child for spearfishing and totally miss the mark on what it's really about. Look, if you want OnlyFans, I don't really give a shit, but I'm just saying, like, the fact that, oh, this is really just an avenue for you to make more money and try to be the big fish in this pond of people.
Yes.
And it's not really about spearfishing. So when you see people spit on fish for whatever the reason, I'm like, hey, you don't fucking get it. And it's like, that to me was upsetting because it devalues the fish. It just it shows it's all about you.
Not only that,
And the reason,
it makes us spear fishermen look bad.
look like assholes.
That one
Yeah.
bad apple of the bunch is gonna ruin it for everybody. Now, people who don't even spearfish or just discover spearfishing, like, wow, this freaking chick just spit on this fish. I'm like, are they all like that? So
Right.
so that woman. Oh my God! Don't even get me started with her. But
We don't need it. We know we don't need to get
yeah,
into
but
it.
anyway, but
yeah.
karma came back and bit her in the ass. A week later, the other woman set a world record, which was very deserving of her, and I'm definitely like pretty stoked for her. Really stoked for her. That was a big tuna too.
Yeah, I'm actually talking to her tomorrow.
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
Yeah, because I happen to have, again, it's a small community, right? And I just want I want us all to be self-regulating, and if we're going to be role models to the rest of the, like, let's do it the right way, not my way that I think, but I want some genuineness, right? I don't want another avenue just to be famous. But I know that her and her husband, like, they go out. I mean, they live it. They go to Baja. They do all this stuff, and I may not agree with everything, but I will say that they are spear fishermen at heart. And then when she did it, I was like, I know she put her time in, and it was like, oh hell yeah, good for you, girl.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are not going to agree with what I say about the cultural aspect of spearfishing, and that's fine. It's all good. I respect whatever point of view they have, and they can do whatever they want. But I'm just saying how I feel. So.
But you just made a
Right.
valid point, Brett, in saying that you can have a governing body, you can have rules and regulations, you can have enforcement officers, but it really comes down to self-regulation, right? So unless you have trigger discipline, not to pull the trigger on a fish that's undersized or out of season or beyond bag limit, nobody can do anything about that but you. I have this person that I'm diving more and more with now, and the other day he shot a fish which is kind of on the small side, and I didn't say anything about it because he pulled the trigger, right? So he has to think of that moment. What made him pull the trigger? What was okay about that? So my suggestion to him was, dude, I'm not going to rag on you for it. That's between you and that small fish you just killed, which is like 2 bites of meat. But my suggestion to him was, figure out the species that you enjoy hunting, learn everything you can about them, what's their breeding cycle, what's the ideal size to take, what's the size you should leave alone. Establish minimums for each size. So I'll give you an example. Like if I want to shoot a papio, yellow spot, omilu, what have you, 3 pounds is my minimum. Same for uku, which is a great job fish. Same for mu, big eye emperor. But if you establish that minimum, there's no question when you're down there looking down the barrel with your finger on the trigger as to whether you're going to pull it or not, because you already know it's the wrong size. If you have to look at a fish and go, maybe not, the answer's already no.
Yeah.
Right? So if people want to concern themselves with sustainability and ethical practices, I feel like that's a good way to start, is establish the species you like to hunt, learn everything you can about them, and then give yourself minimums. And another thing that we try to do is we try to always get what I call like a mixed plate or a mixed bag. Okay, I shot one of those. Now I'm going to shoot one of these. And then I'm going to shoot another one of these. And maybe I go in with 5 fish, but they're all of a different species, as opposed to just 10 of the same. Right?
Right. And some of that's unique to where you dive too. Like, obviously the islands are completely different than here, but where you don't have the cultural aspect, you have the lineage, if you will, like to stuff, but in the history, but you don't have the cultural aspect. You don't have the types of diving that you guys are doing there. It's just very different, but the fundamental values are exactly the same regardless of where you go, right? Like, and I love the point that you mentioned before about adapting based on our experience, because I love it where it's like where I'm going somewhere new for the first time, and it's like I'm looking for these fish. You read up on them, you learn about them, you try to figure it out, and then you apply like technique number 1. And I'm not seeing them. It's not. Or if we have like 3 of us in a group, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. You try this, and you try this, and we'll see what works, and then we'll adjust it. And like the first day is kind of funny, and then it's like game on. You can tell it's like, okay, this is how we hunt them. Like, and I've done that with different species, but yeah, it's fun, and I think you can't fake that, right? You just can't. I think about it too, where it's like we pay, like a lot of people pay for guides, and I know because people don't have time, and they go to these places, and then they're like, shoot these massive fish. But I think it genuinely that was set up for people that have a lot of experience, and so they want to do something different. So they go to these places with that ability to adapt and try these things with these guides and put themselves in these situations where they can shoot these big fish. But then sometimes you see these brand new spear fishermen going on these trips, and it's like there's locals there, and they're just shooting the place up, and you're like, how not to be welcome? Like, you shot 30 grouper. I've seen some crazy stuff where it's like you've shot, like John always says this. He mentioned this the last time we were out together diving. He's like, you can judge someone by the fish they shoot. And he's like, and you can judge where they are and their little like maturity, spearfishing maturity. It's interesting. And again, this isn't like, I don't feel like this is being judgy. This is just like, it's true. You can tell someone where they're at by the fish they shoot. Like sometimes people shoot giant fish, and it's like, but knowing a couple people that do that, it's like, do you know how many fish they pass on? Like, it takes years. It's like, nope. It takes a lot of discipline. Nope.
Al's been waiting 20 years to shoot a bluefin.
But right. And you know what? And I talked about this too. It's like, I could very easily pay to go do something and have someone put me on a fish today, probably, right? But I'd rather do it myself and learn everything along the way and make all the stupid ass mistakes of like, oh, I approached that at a different angle. I did this, I did that, because when I do finally like link up, it makes everything so much more valuable. And then the byproduct is all the knowledge that I gain by failing, right? Because, and if you're doing it just to be able to get constant content, then you're missing the whole point of it all.
Well, what you just stated there ties into what Al had said earlier about rite of passage, learning how to rig your own equipment. What is the point if you're an influencer that was given something as a sponsorship because they wanted to piggyback on your volume of followers. Somebody loaded the gun for you, rigged it for you, put you on the spot, said do A, B, and C, and all you really had to do was a 10-second dive and pull the trigger, and then they landed the fish for you, bled it, gutted it, put it on ice, processed it. You're not a spear fisherman. You're not.
Yeah, and then
Wow.
what's funny too is like
Nice.
when we were on our Bluefin trip, our captain was telling us stories of the Florida guys. Yeah, he was telling us a story. He took these Florida guys out bluefin diving, and none of them could shoot a bluefin. So he told them, "Do you want me to shoot one for you guys?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." So the captain jumps in the water, shoots a big giant bluefin, lands it by himself now, puts the fish on a boat just so these Florida guys could take a picture of it and act like they shot the fish. So that's what I mean. Like spearfishing is selling out to dummies like this, and it's come to my knowledge that there's actually quite a few dummies who are doing this shit. I mean, I don't know. I hate hearing that. I really do. I mean, if I saw somebody doing that, I'd call them out straight up.
You'd call somebody
Yeah.
out for changing
I
lanes
would
in front
say
of you,
like
though.
Oh, I had to call somebody out yesterday for on a road rage. So yeah.
so if you don't follow Al and you want some amazing entertainment of like someone being real, follow Al and you'll be like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, fuck that guy. Yep. Yep.
But no, I mean that's what I mean. It's
No.
like you
I
said, there's just people who are not very genuine in spearfishing anymore, and it's kind of sad to see people that actually do that stuff. I mean, for me, I'm blown away when I hear stories like that. And like I even told the captain, I was like, "No, no way, dude." He's like, "No, for real." I went in there to shoot a fish for them so they could take a picture of it. I'm like, that's unbelievable. I blew my mind. It disturbed me for like a good hour after that. Like I couldn't even go to sleep. It was mind blowing. Yeah,
well, it's funny because some of the more popular people, like you said, are piggybacking off of spearfishing, but it's I was like in church they'd be like beware of false prophets, It's like, yeah, be careful who you follow and careful, because they may not seem to be who they are. I mean, there's a lot of great
yeah.
people for sure, but there's some knuckleheads, man. Yeah. Uh, but speaking of shooting bluefin, let's talk about your recent trip to California, where we talked about, where you mentioned about coming here after 40 years or whatever, 30 years of diving and shooting a fish. But there were some specifics about your trip and some goals that I think are unique to you guys, both of you guys. And I wanted to get into that because that kind of goes, Bryan, into your stuff where what you're doing now. Can you tell us a little bit about like where the trip came from? I know, and how it progressed as you the details of it, basically.
Go ahead. Talk about you and what your goals was.
Well, I think it kind of stemmed from Al wanting to do it, right? And then I looked at it as an opportunity to prove a couple things, not necessarily to other people, because that's never a concern of mine. I could really care less what other people think. I try to just move forward on my own path. But some of the things I wanted to prove to myself is, the kind of guns that I've been building for myself and for other people. I wanted to try to test them to the level that others would doubt that they could perform, right? Can you really land a tuna with a 115 centimeter roller gun as opposed to my 6 foot long, 20 pound, 5 or 6 band wood gun, right? Because that mentality is that's what's always been used, so that's what's required. Whereas if you're someone like myself or Al, something better comes along, things are proven by physics, you can connect the dots between things. Why wouldn't you try it if you can get the same or comparable power out of something that's a smaller package, that's easier to maneuver, easier to track, easier to travel with, and gain the same effect without half of your sport tube weight being one gun, right? So my goal was to see if I could land a triple-digit bluefin with an inverted roller, and if possible with a double roller. And so interestingly enough, in California, there's bag limits, right? So if we're in California, you can only get 2 bluefin per day. So I was going to try to shoot one with the inverted and one with the double. But then after I shot and landed one with the inverted, and I was super stoked because I was able to prove that goal to myself. I don't really care what anybody else thought about it. I'm not trying to argue against the guys that use a different tool for the job. But then when it came time to shoot the second with the double roller, I look at my own ethical system and what am I going to do with that second fish? I already have 100-something pound bluefin tuna. I'm on a vacation. I got to get it processed. I got to bring it home. It's not like I can sell it. I'm not in a place where my friends and family are around that I can give it away. So I saw no reason to shoot a second one. So maybe the next time I'm in the water, I'll just go for the double roller, right? So I'll just put that goal on hold. And then, there was some talk about, whether Dyneema works for shooting line versus 400-pound mono, which everybody uses. So I enjoy using Dyneema, but people were saying, oh, well, do you tie it or do you crimp it? There's always two sides of the story. Everybody has their own opinion. So I crimp it. I used it, and the fish I shot, I had a 3-atom float. That thing pulled my float down to where I couldn't even see it.
Gone.
just gone. And I even told Al, I hope I see that again, right? And then 30 seconds later, he was ready to clip on his second 3-atom for me. And he's like, did you see your float yet? And then I looked and I go, oh, it's over there. And it was still tombstoning. So he hooked on his second float. And, I float line clutched that thing all the way up to the shooting line. And then he took off on another run. And then I worked him all the way to shooting line again. And he took off on a third run. So I can't think of a better test of equipment in the rigging, like the Dyneema, to the hybrid bungee that I was using, to the Rife float that I was using, to how I connected everything, to how the slip tip was rigged. That's what you want to know, right? Because that's not just me talking shit. That's putting what I know and what I specify into practice and proving that it does work. So that was a big goal for me. Now for Al, he'll tell you a different story.
So bluefin tuna has been a dream of mine since my early 20s. Been spearfishing since I was 10, but it wasn't until like 18, 19, 20, my early 20s where I got really good. Like we were talking about mentors, I hooked up with a friend of mine to this day, Rayton Cialetto. We became good friends. We dove all the time. He taught me a lot. He made me realize unlock my potential in spearfishing. And we entered tournaments and whatnot. Rayton and I made it to the nationals one year and everything. Anyway, so in my early 20s, like I received a book from Terry Moss, The Blue Water Hunting, and on that picture of that book is Terry Moss with a big giant bluefin. And ever since then, I was obsessed with shooting a bluefin. And but my life took a really bad turn. It's like I made a lot of bad decisions. I got caught up in drugs. I just threw my life away basically. And it wasn't until my daughter was born that I finally started to get my shit together. So it was like I've been off drugs for like 15 plus years now, sober, getting a business, and now that I finally got my life together, I kind of thought back, hey, maybe I can still accomplish my dream of shooting a bluefin. Because during that time, when I was all messed up, I still had those dreams of diving, wanting to shoot bluefin and whatnot. But all that just disappeared and got replaced with drugs. And so, yeah, now that my life was together and whatnot, I was telling him, man, I was like, let's go on a fucking bluefin trip. And to me, being able to go on a bluefin trip shooting and landing a bluefin trip had a lot of sentimental value. Like it proved to myself that I could definitely accomplish my dreams. I knew what it took. I finally made it in my life. I finally made it to a point in my life where I overcame a lot of these obstacles like addiction and all this stuff. It's crazy. And so the bluefin has more of a emotional value to me than anything else. And that was my goal of a bluefin tuna, just proving to myself that I can finally make it in my life.
Wow. That's that's fucking powerful, man. That's
I mean,
really
fuck,
cool.
dude. I was homeless several times. I was so fucked up on drugs. I lived out of my car at Salt Pond, and it wasn't until my uncle saw me there one morning. He's like, "Oh, what you doing over here? You living in your car?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Bro, what's going on?" I told him, "Hey, fuck, uncle, I'm fucked up." Tell me, you know what? You come live with me. He took me in, helped me out. Lived with him for a long time, tried to get my shit together, but kept fucking relapsing back into drugs no matter how hard I tried. And then fuck, my daughter was born, and I tried to do my best to quit all that shit, but the first couple of years was really tough. And I kept falling back
Yeah.
and trying to be a good dad, kept falling back, trying to be a good dad, and finally I was like, fuck, I gotta get my shit together. And I finally did, and
So
yeah, so it's that's why. And then now that I got back into spearfishing, about 8 years ago, I started getting better again, and getting better back in the groove. And I was like, "Fuck, I think I can live my dream." And I told myself, "I think I can prove,
so
I can pull it off." With his help, I got back in shape. Well, I never was in shape, but now I am in shape. It's like what I learned
well,
about
you were in
myself.
a shape, maybe.
Well, what I learned in preparation for the Bluefin trip too was I learned a shitload about myself in preparation for the Bluefin trip. So that's why this Bluefin had a lot of value to me. I learned all the missing key ingredient of my life was discipline. That was the most powerful thing that was missing my whole entire life was discipline for myself. Learning to love myself and being disciplined enough to work hard, do what it takes to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And I learned so much about myself in the past 9 months. It was mind blowing.
I actually thought you were going to say purpose because you mentioned when your daughter was born and that helped you kind of motivate
Yeah,
you
of
to get
course.
off drugs. And then the bluefin, it's like, oh, it's a goal, purpose. That's my purpose. I'm gonna fuck this up now and like go for it. But hey, off the topic like of spearfishing, but this is more about people that spearfish. But what do you think the catalyst was for you to number one, a like go towards that life of drugs and going that way, and then number two, when you finally you mentioned you relapse, but what was that final thing? How did you get help and like finally was like, I'm gonna make it this time?
Um, so my daughter was always my motivation to do better. She was. I realized even when I was on drugs that she was the only thing that had any value in my life, and I wanted to be the best father I can for her. Um, so I kept pushing to try to do better, try to do better. But shit, man, anybody who's been an addict before knows, man, addiction is a motherfucker. That thing will not. Addiction will not let you go. It will hold on to you for the rest of your life if it could. To break that chain is just unbelievable. And my daughter was really the only one that actually made me break that chain. Providing for her, being the best that I can. And as far as help, so 8 years ago, 8 9 years ago now, no, about 8 years ago, because I quit drugs, I kind of started drinking a lot and whatnot, and I couldn't really kick addiction. I stopped hard drugs, but I drank. Uh, Something went wrong in my head. I ended up getting putting my daughter on the bus that morning, sending her to school, started drinking. Got really depressed. Hated myself. Hated my life. I was ready to kill myself that morning. Had my gun on my lap. Was ready to do it. Something happened where it's like I got a second chance. Something clicked in my head. It's like, fuck, Al, you need help. You need some fucking help. So right then and there, I was like, fuck, I need help. Went through my phone, found a psychologist. It wasn't really an addiction thing at that time I felt that I needed help with. It was more of a mental problem, mental issue, which led to my addiction. So I got a psychologist, and I've been still seeing her for like since then. She's really helped me heal from my past trauma, which caused my addiction, my depression, my anxiety, my bad choices. And so she has a lot to do with who I am today. So kudos to her for sure, you know. So it's pretty, it was nuts. So that's why, like, I've never been this strong ever in my entire life. Like, it's mind blowing what I learned in the last 9 months, in the top of the 7 years in the past, to becoming the person I am today. I had to go through fucking hell in my entire life to be the man I am today. And I think that I think there's a purpose to that for me. Maybe it help others realize that, you know, it's never too late to change. Fuck, I'm 45 years old, you know. And I just started to get my life together, you know, so it's never too late. So it's pretty nuts.
Well, thank you. You know, Al, thank you for sharing that, because I know there's a ton of people out there that have been in that situation or in that situation, and thank you for being honest about that.
For men, even a lot of my friends, I had a discussion with an old friend of mine about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. He said something really interesting. A lot of us men, we suffer in silence. We suffer in silence. And that's fucking scary. That really is. Because we get to a breaking point. We really do. Men get to a breaking point where they just give up. And it doesn't have to be that way, you know? We just kind of have to swallow our pride and ego and just seek help. Reach out to a friend. Get assistance. Getting assistance. You know? Go up to a friend and say, hey man, I'm not doing so well. I need your help to get me help. You know? And it's not easy for a guy to say that, you know, to admit that he needs help. I mean, it fucking took me all my life to finally say that, you know. But I think it's very important for us men to like we have to admit it to ourselves sometimes. In order to be a better person for our families, to ourselves, for sure. I didn't mean to turn this into a
Nah,
emotional
fuck
thing,
it.
but
It's good.
I just thought it was very important.
You mentioned the man thing. There's a joke in my family. It's no, I'm good. I'm good,
Yeah,
man. I'm good. You know, and I was like fucked up, and I'm like, no, I'm good.
yeah.
I'm yeah, good to go,
We
man.
suffer in silence, and it's tough.
Yeah. Well, so let's change the subject a little bit. Pipe guns or wood guns?
So I think with wood guns,
Bryan, you want to say
I think
something?
with wood guns,
Yeah, go ahead.
we can go back to, you know, Al's example of Terry Moss, right? When 70s, 80s, Jay Rife, when spearfishing was coming of its own, when they were venturing into deeper water, shooting larger fish, you needed to build something that could be powerful enough to land fish of that size, right? And the wisdom at that point was we're using conventional muzzled guns. And the reason you use a wood gun is when you add more rubber, or you shorten the rubber, or you power it up, you create additional recoil. If your shaft is too long, you increase the shaft whip. You have issues such as muzzle flip. And those are huge issues in the way of accuracy, especially if you're trying to shoot something that's 20 feet away. Because if you're 1 inch high, that turns into 12 inches high by the time it reaches its target. So to counteract that recoil, you have to then add some lead ballasting. And it's a lot easier to cut a channel on the underside of the gun or under the track and insert your lead ballasting in a way to where that recoil comes straight back as opposed to up and down. So I really feel like that's why wood became so popular. And then for Reef's guns, you try to power it up, but you're only shooting like a 7mm shaft. And then you do an enclosed track. But I think few people understand that enclosed tracks are a catch-22 in the sense that if your track is too tight, your track to shaft tolerance is too tight, it creates a vacuum effect, which actually slows the shaft down. And it also limits the shafts that you can use, right? If your gun is tailored to shoot 9/32 shaft, you can't put a 5/16 shaft in there. It won't fit. It won't work. So to me, kind of a limiting factor of wood guns is they're very specific in purpose. We're going to power it this way. We're going to use this shaft. We're going to target these fish. These are our limitations. You can't change that, right? So now we're going to compare that to a pipe gun. The reason I love pipe guns so much is because it's plug and play. You can cut the size of the barrel down if it's too long. You can fill it with foam if you want to absorb some of the recoil. You can change out the handle and trigger. You can change out the muzzle. If you don't like this configuration, you can change it to another. When one company comes out with something that's better than what you've been using, you can take that off and put that back in. So that's why I really enjoy pipe guns. And pipe guns don't have the same weight as the wooden guns, especially if you're going to do a roller configuration, because now you're powering in parallel. So unlike a conventional where everything's pulling back on the muzzle and creating that shaft whip, creating that recoil, when you use a roller, it cancels the force out. So you can actually get away with using, say, an aluminum barrel and still shooting an 8mm shaft with it and powering it up so there's like 200 pounds of pressure at the mech. You can't do that. The wood gun requires mass. But then if you've ever dove, deeper than 40 feet and you're trying to drag this 160 centimeter gun down with you and you shoot this fish and you try to bring that log back up or you're trying to track something, it's near impossible. So that's my take on wood versus pipe.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, having grown up in the land of giant timber guns and being super guilty of it too. Like you said, anytime you dive past 40 feet, right? And it's there's little techniques that we've had to adopt to help that, right? Whether it's lowering, throwing the gun down and meeting it halfway down as you're dropping, whether it's like certain different things to adapt diving with those giant guns. And I think it's kind of interesting looking at us, if we're different species of animals, like how we adapt to do certain environments based on the tools we use. But I've used pipe guns quite a bit, and it sure is nice on a reef, like to have them and track, just to track, you're not getting like carpal tunnel every time you try to move the thing, right. Go ahead, Al.
Oh, I mean, honestly, when it comes to wood or pipe guns, everybody has their own preference. To each their own. I mean, whatever works best for you is great. And I think, if you do want to experiment, go ahead and experiment, whether you be going from pipe to wood or wood to pipe. All I say is that really do your research and give it a chance. Because, for instance, if you're going from a pipe gun to a wood gun, you're not going to really enjoy it at first. There's a lot of figuring out you have to do. Like you said, how you maneuver it, what's the best way to dive down with it, what's the best way to aim with it and whatnot. So, just if you're gonna make a conversion or try something new, just give it a chance, because I see so many horror stories or so many people just really disappointing when they're converting from wood to a roller. Everybody's like, "Oh, this gun no more power. Oh, this gun, oh, kind of feel funny, look and aim straight, and all this kind of stuff," and they immediately dismiss it. Where I feel like, hey, you got to really put in the effort and research to really have something work for you. So I don't know. To each their own. Wood or rollers. I use both. I'm very accompanied to using almost any type of gun, and I'll say I'm pretty successful with it. But what you're saying about maneuvering and learning to use a wooden gun, man, I learned that with that tuna gun this past trip. Like, holy crap! Like, it was really challenging just to dive down with it. I've never used a gun that large in my entire life. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how I'm gonna dive down with it. So I took a couple of dives, and I finally leveled off. I noticed I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be level right now, but I'm not. I was diving kind of crooked. I didn't know which way I was diving because it's blue water, right? You don't have a target that you're aiming for. You can't see the bottom, and plus the water was dirty. But I really noticed, okay, this is a heavy gun. So I just held it straight down vertically, and I just kind of just kept my arm and hand loose, and I dove down, and I just let the gun lead me straight down. As soon as I discovered that and had a better technique of coming down vertically and leveling off perfect, that's when I became successful in shooting a bluefin. Because the prior times of missing and all this stuff, I made so many mistakes just because of that gun was just so hard to use and maneuver, level off, and all these things variables I had to consider. And then once I used the gun and learned how to use the gun to my advantage of my diving technique, then I was able to really be successful with it. Yeah, I
Well,
mean it's trippy.
Right. It helps to keep it close to your body too if you're going to pivot, right? And
Yes,
then stick it out.
yeah. So
Or because
that was like
yeah.
the second mistake I made in the excitement of seeing the tuna. I'm like that, and I'm trying to move this 65-inch log sideways, and I can't keep up with the fish. I'm like, what am I doing? Then I learned, okay, I put it back in, move, then extend out, and stuff like that. But yeah, it took a lot of getting used to. But
I think too the wood gun versus pipe guns, some people think some people are asking like the Euro wood guns, like true about the same size as a regular pipe gun. It just happens to be wood versus a pipe gun, not necessarily like a giant wooden tuna gun,
yeah,
but they all have different
yeah.
characteristics, right?
yeah.
So yeah, so we take the Rife Euro for example. It's really small diameter, short, and very maneuverable. So that's a great crossover gun for those who want to go from a pipe gun to a wood gun or a wood gun to a pipe gun. Same thing with like the cap. The cap is a great gun too. It's Euro style, very small diameter, and it's a great crossover gun. So, and has the benefits of what most people will like, the maneuverability of pipe with the mass and good feel of a wood gun. So,
So to add to that, Brett, if you're gonna be diving reef only, and you're making the decision between should I get a 2-band conventional wood gun or should I get a same size single roller? So one of the things that's interesting in regards to physics is if you have a conventional muzzle gun that's say 100 centimeters and a roller that's 100 centimeters, that 100 centimeter roller is almost twice as powerful as that 2-band conventional. And that 100 centimeter roller will have the same power and range as a conventional that's 20 centimeters longer. So my 100 centimeter roller will have the same range and power as a 120 conventional gun. So that way, if you're trying to dive in confined space, if you're trying to target small, fast-moving fish, I'll take a roller because I've got more range, I've got more power, I can track super fast through the reef. It's easy to get down, it's easy to come up. That's my rationale between the two.
I have a question regarding that actually. When you said it's similar power, I understand the stroke or the band stretch, right? Because you're getting the full length of the gun, where conventional basically stops at once
Two
the bands are
thirds.
done contracting. Yeah, 2/3, right? So, so if you have a traditional gun where does the extra power come from, or from a single band competing with the two band
So
standard?
what you just said, a conventional only utilizes 2/3 of the length of the barrel because the first third, the bands are at rest. They're not under any tension whatsoever. You just reach out there, you grab them, you load them, but your power curve is only 2/3 of the barrel length. As opposed to a roller, you're utilizing 100% of the barrel, but that rubber is already under 100% stretch of pretension. So when you go to pull that off the muzzle bridge, it's already got 45 pounds of pressure before you even begin to load it. And whatever, we did some experimentation and we found universally, be it a single, be it a double, whatever it was, the muzzle weight was double at the shark fin tab close to the neck. So if you're starting out with 45 pounds at the muzzle, you've got 90 pounds at the rearmost shark fin. So that's 90 pounds of forward force you have with a single roller utilizing that full barrel length. And that carries the shaft through, right? The full length. Whereas if you use a conventional, it carries it to that 2/3 point and then it just kind of stops. And that's where you see shots dropping off. And, some people want proof in this matter. I've taken people out. Hey, I'm going to go do some target practicing. You want to come with me? I'm using a 90 single roller. My friend's using 100. Euro, conventional, 2-band. And he didn't realize that his gun only had an effective kill range of 10 feet. Whereas I was taking 15, 16, 17-foot shots with a 90. And having good penetration. And, a minimum penetration value is the shaft has to go through the target at least enough inches in order for that flopper to engage. Not just touch it. You have to penetrate through so it can toggle back. And after seeing that, he's like, I need a fucking roller.
Yeah.
So like Bryan said,
So
45 pounds at the muzzle, double that at the shark fin. Now if you have a double roller, that's 180 pounds of force on a shaft, on a 8-mil shaft. Especially if you think about it, you do a 100-centimeter double roller with 80 pounds each band at the shark fin. That's 160 pounds. That's a lot of force shooting that little 8-mil shaft, and there's no recoil. So the physics states that if there's no recoil, all that power is being diverted directly to the shaft and it's going to be accurate and there's not going to be any shaft whip. So the shaft whip has a lot to do with the inaccuracies on a traditional gun. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And what I think a lot of people trip out on when the first time they use a roller, they shoot it and it's like, this gun has no power. But it actually does. Like 6 years ago when I bought my first roller, I shot it. I shot a Kahala, I think. I was like, did I even get it? I'm like, oh yeah, I got it. Because it felt like nothing. But the shaft penetrated all the way through the Kahala and whatnot. I was just like, ever since then, I was hooked. I was like, oh, I got to play around with this roller. I got to figure this thing out. So I started playing with all kinds of different band sizes, shaft sizes, pretensions, and whatnot. And I was like, wow, like the sky's the limit with these rollers. Like you could really juice up the power on these things, and it doesn't even have any shaft whip. And I was shooting a 7-mil shaft on a 110 with 16-mil rubbers, full pretension, with the last shark fin loaded, and it was shooting like 18 feet, no problem, with good penetration, accurately. And I was like, boom. I'm like, I'm never going back. It was unreal.
that's a good point, because I found myself falling into that trap, especially if I switch guns around a lot. But I shot my double roller, and my shot my friend's Captain Bly double roller too, and it was like, hey, how does it feel? I'm like, it doesn't feel as powerful as
Yep.
mine. And it's like, oh, why not? Oh, because mine has more kick, but in a roller, that's not good.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I was like, I'm judging this like a standard gun, like how much powerful it is based on the kick. And really that's like ass
And
backwards.
that's what I mentioned earlier.
Um,
Like if you're transitioning and you're trying to roll it for the first time, you gotta really give it a chance. You know what I mean? A lot of people get discouraged, and you gotta really put your research and give it a chance. And one way to really do that and really find out what the potential of your roller gun is, especially when you first get into it, is go target practice with it. You're gonna see the accuracy, the potential, the penetration. You're gonna see all the great benefits of it. Because if you just get into a roller gun, go diving with it, try and shoot a fish with it, you're not really seeing all its potential right away. It's and then a lot of people are like, oh, this thing is shitty. Fuck, I'll sell them. Like that kid Dylan. He bought that one roller. Then couldn't figure out why it wasn't working for him. He came and saw Bryan. Bryan told him. Bryan geeked out on him, told him everything, and he ends up buying a roller from Bryan. Now the kid is like blowing his mind, stoked now. He's got to really put in that effort.
so, I mean, we could talk about bands for an hour too, I guess, but
Yeah.
what, Bryan, what are some issues? Like one of the issues that I've encountered with a roller is entanglement with shooting line, getting tangled at the muzzle. Have you seen that at all before?
I personally haven't had any issues. That really boils down to the tension on that segment of line from your attachment point to your shaft. If you're gonna be a lazy diver and let that line be slack, expect an entanglement, right? So the more experience you have, the more you understand your tools. Like I have very set protocols that I go through when I load my gun, right? Before I even load the band, I make sure the shaft's engaged. And then I load the band, and now I look at my line's tension point. And if it's gotten loose, I pull down and then forward, and I tighten up the drag on the reel line. And now we're tight everywhere. Flip the gun over. Make sure you're not going to have your line caught on anything. These are the kind of things that you learn through experience. So if you just jump right into that realm and you don't understand it, as Al was saying, you could have a negative experience. And if you're not willing to work through that experience and figure out the finer points, you're really going to miss out in the long run, right? So everybody has the mentality of power that more is better. That's not the case, because unless you understand some physics and you understand the concept of terminal velocity, you can actually overpower the mass of the shaft. You can actually increase the shaft width. You can increase the recoil, and those equal inaccurate shots. The goal with any gun, be it conventional or a roller, is basing off the length of the gun, the diameter of the shaft, the length of the shaft. What's our mass that we're attempting to project? And then you have to get out there and you got to try different rubbers, different lengths, different powering percentages. And you really want to figure that out. So personally, what I do once I figure that out is I have a Ziploc bag I keep my rubber in. I write what gun it's for. I write what rubber I'm using and what the initial length was, because rubber is going to elongate over time. And when it comes time to replace your bands, you want to have that point of reference. You spend all that time figuring out the secret, so you might as well have a point of reference so you can replicate it when it comes time to. But that is time in, right? So all these people that watch YouTube videos, all these people that follow social media, nobody's going to give you the formula. Because if I give you the formula, I might as well just shut the doors to my business. And especially if the competitors don't know the formula, why would I give that away? So some things, most things in spearfishing should be earned.
It's amazing how I see a lot of competitors who I'm sure the guns and stuff they shoot fine and whatnot, but I can see so much improvement on their product, and I just have a hard time understanding why they don't go that route. But I mean, to each their own. If they're happy with their product they're putting out and people are successful with it, great, you know. But like Bryan said, we can't give all the secrets out. That's why there's some people who
Well,
like message out to me, oh, how do I do this and how do I do that? I'm like, bro, you gotta go figure it out on your own, bro. I spent 10 years trying to figure that shit out. I'm not gonna fucking tell you. Fucking fuck off. No, for real. I'm like, fuck off, bro. I'm not
oh
telling you
boy.
shit. Yeah.
I had one of the football players that I coach. He came over last weekend, and I was teaching him how to make bands, you know, and how to like make sure they don't slip because he was going to Catalina on a spearfishing trip. But I was like, man, I wish I had one of these when I was growing up, like a mentor, you know.
Well,
Um,
can you
but
imagine? Can you imagine being on a trip and having your bands fail and not knowing how to retie that? Your trip's over.
right, yeah,
That's basic spearfishing
over us,
knowledge. So if you don't learn that as you're growing as a spearfisherman, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because now I have to have someone with me that can do things for me. And that's not how you grow as a person, just in life in general, right? You want to be able to attain as much knowledge as you go through life as possible. So you're as self-reliant as possible. And then when you find someone that's hungry for knowledge and has the right mentality, you can then share that knowledge with that person who's deserving of it.